All right, so my strategy in the arena right now, pretty much, we throw out our bias and hopefully she'll get banned over Lazarius, but even if she doesn't, you can bring a Revive on Death, and as long as everyone's under a Revive on Death, they're getting a 30% chance to place a Petrification anytime they get attacked, so it's kind of like a Mithrala passive. And she also has increased accuracy, so we can strip the buffs and place our debuffs easier. And if she gets locked out, her A1 has a 40% chance of placing block active skills, which is nice. And if none of that suits the occasion, she brings her own Stone Skin and puts 30% worth of continuous heals out on everybody for 2 turns with a taunt, and she can throw down a leech to help keep her team alive even more. And her A1 puts a continuous heal on her and another champion and decreases whoever you attack's turn meter by 30%. And also, whenever she gets attacked, which she brings taunt, so she'll be attacked a lot, she puts a big version of decreased speed out and decreases the damage taken by all allies from skills by 20%, and she'll receive that damage instead, but she's under a Snow Skin that she brings herself. So, even if she's not like who we want to pick, she's never a bad option to have on the team. And we have her in 5-star Temporal Chains, and it decreases the enemy's speed for each active buff they are under, except for buffs placed at the start of the round. So, if you're going up against an Arbiter, a Siphi, somebody like that, we like to have Temporal Chains to help even out the speed lead, because we're only able to get 378 on her, and we're only able to get 406 with Lazarius. But the reason that we want Lazarius to be our main lead is because her A3 not only fills the turn meter of everybody by 20%, but decreases all the enemies' turn meter by 20%, and puts a 50% increased attack and a 25% strength on everybody. And if we already can go first, or if we're going up against a Cometus or somebody, we can put out a block debuffs on everybody that strips their debuffs, or buffs, sorry, and puts a block buffs on all air. I said that backwards. She puts the block debuffs on all allies, and decreases the duration of all buffs on enemies by 2 turns, and puts a block buff on everybody. Her A1 isn't really anything to concern yourself with, it just puts a shield on the ally with the lowest HP for 2 turns. But her passive, one of the hands down top 10 passives in the game. At the start of this champion's turn, puts a Perfect Veil and 50% increased accuracy on them for 2 turns, so it effectively adds 50% to her accuracy, taking her from about 450 up to about close to 700 on the accuracy. And at the end of this champion's turn, revives a random ally with 50% HP and 50% turn meter, and puts a Perfect Veil buff on the revived ally for 2 turns, and that's on the 3-turn cooldown. So, you can't go wrong with her first form, and if she gets locked out, you can always go into her second form. You can still half of the target's turn meter, and it cannot be resisted, and it ignores ally protection, strength, and shields, double hitter, and 30% of the target's defense. Or you can use the A2, which hits pretty good. It's an AoE that ignores shield and increased defense. Before attacking, removes all debuffs from this champion, so it's a full self-cleanse, and it increases this attack damage by 15% per debuff removed. So if she's even got like 3 debuffs, that's almost a 50% attack increase. And if no debuffs were removed, increases this attack's damage by 15% for each ally alive. The A1, very unique, but not really that crazy in the arena. It's more for like bosses, because it does apply to bosses. The first hit of this champion increases this champion's attack by 3% up to 30. The second hit decreases 3% of the target's attack defense, or destroys 3% of the target's max HP, depending on their type, stacks up to 30%. It says that this effect does not work against support type champions, but it does work against bosses. And then the passive on this turn, at the start of this champion's turn, puts 50% increased attack and a 30% increased crit damage on them for 2 turns. It increases the cooldown of all enemies by 2 turns whenever this champion kills an enemy. And if this champion kills 2 or more enemies in a single attack, it cannot be resisted. So, if she kills somebody in her second form, she resets the cooldown on every enemy on the team. And she has a 25% speed aura in all battles. We run Intimidating Presence 6-star on her. That way we can strengthen our team's aura by 35%, taking that 25% speed boost all the way up to about 32% speed boost, or 33, which is what Carnage has, and it's the highest speed aura in the game. It's separate in all battles, not just the arena. And it also weakens the team's aura by 20%, so it takes their, even if it's a Carnage at 33%, it takes it down to like 27. So mixing her with our bias, Temporal Chains, it definitely helps equal out the speed. So as long as the other team isn't going like above 450, 470, we do tend to go first. And that's kind of how we lead out our fights. And then when it comes into if there's a Hilfi, Odin, anyone that's going to bring block damage, or if we think they're going to have a lot of Stone Skin, we go Gizmak Terrible. He puts an unresistible burn that ignores Stone Skin, ignores everything out at the start of the fight, and it's a 50-50 chance of putting it out at the start of each turn. And his A3 puts an increased crit damage, crit rate, and speed on all allies and grants an extra turn. We go into the A2. That is an AoE, but before attacking, it increases the duration of all burns by 1 turn, then instantly activates 1 tick of all HP burns on all enemies, and it cannot be resisted. And it will finally increase the duration of all debuffs on all enemies by 1 turn, and put a big burst and a decreased speed on all enemies for 2 turns, and none of this can be resisted. That's really what we use it for, is to burn off Stone Skin. But if we get into a fight and there's no Stone Skin, or if we get it off and he makes it around to the second turn, we go into the second form, use the A2, it's an AoE. Before attacking, puts a 6% decreased defense on all enemies for 2 turns. This buff cannot be resisted if the target is under a burn. So it's a guaranteed decreased defense because they're almost always going to be under a burn. And it puts an extra hit on enemies under a burn. And if it kills an enemy, he gets an extra turn, which goes into the A3 that puts out a Pain Link, which this is the only champion in the game that Pain Link actually matters. And it cannot be removed, resisted, or blocked. It goes through block debuffs, it goes through everything except for Mercurial. Don't use it against Mercurial. And when calculating the damage inflicted by Pain Link, it is 75% of the attacker's skill multiplier is reflected. The damage inflicted by Pain Link will ignore 100% of the target's defense. So it can actually hurt them more than it hurts you. But it doesn't really matter how hard it hits you, because you're putting a taunt on yourself and everyone's going to attack you, and an unkillable on this champion for 2 turns, and a 50% ally protection on all allies, except for the champion for 2 turns. And the way that Pain Link works, if they're attacking you, and you're taunted and everyone else is ally protected, it works pretty standard. But the way it's coded in, as long as you have ally protection out, since when they attack an ally, you're taking half of that damage, they're going to take half of the Pain Link damage for attacking an ally. So very good to have on your team. And A1 hits pretty hard too. So that's pretty much how we deal with Stone Skin and have as a secondary nuker. Now, our primary nuker is going to be Siegfried, but he's also a secondary support. Everybody knows what he does on his damage form, and before he dies, he puts out a block damage and heals by half of his HP and then gets an instant turn. But what a lot of people seem to sleep on is if you can make it to where he's the last man standing, he brings a revive all dead allies with half health, half turn meter, with a block damage for 2 turns on them, a full team cleanse, and heals all allies by 30% of their max HP, and puts a block debuff on them for 2 turns. And the A1 is an AoE that heals all allies by 20% of the damage inflicted, and it actually hits pretty hard. His passive is decrease the damage taken from skills by 20%, and yes, that does stack with Arbias' 20% damage mitigation from everybody else on the team as she's in her second form, so he's reducing damage taken from skills by 40% effectively. Any Siegfried worth his weight is going to have a lightning cage on. The reason I say that is because you do not want that block damage getting taken away. You need him to be the last man standing. I cannot stress that enough. And then our second primary nuker would be Geralt. And it's because she is just broken right now at this point in the game. Her A2 is an AoE that puts a provoke on all enemies for 1 turn, and it ignores block debuffs and places even if this attack is a weak hit. Then puts a protected unkillable buff for 3 turns and an unprotected counterattack buff for 3 turns. It's great. But you can go into her second form and use her nukes, or you can stay in the first form and take advantage of the counterattack, because yes, it's only a single hitter, but before attacking, it strips all buffs from the target and increases the cooldown of a random skill on the target by 2 turns, even if it lands as a weak hit. So everything she does, affinity doesn't really matter. Yeah, the damage gets affected, but the specials like stripping buffs and increasing cooldowns does not matter. But her main use, and what I think she probably does better than any other champion in the game, even better than Marius, is her second form damage. Her A1 is an AoE that has a 25% chance of repeating the attack, and it ignores block damage, just flat out. The A1 ignores block damage. It's a hard-hitting AoE and has a 1 out of 4 chance of repeating, and I've seen it repeat 3-4 times in a row, fairly regularly. Her A2 is an AoE. This may be the hardest hitting potential skill in the game. Damage of this skill increases by 10% for each buff on the champion and on the target. It ignores 30% of the target's defense and will ignore half of the target's defense instead if this champion has more buffs than the target. The reason that is so great is because her passive, the champion inflicts more damage as their HP decreases 1% per 1% loss, and the champion receives less damage as their HP decreases by 0.5% for every 1% loss. So she's on unkillable, she's down to 1%, she's still at 99% more damage. And she can ignore half of the target's defense, but that's not all, there is more. Her passive, or secret skill, it's not really a passive, on a 2-turn cooldown, keep that in mind, strips all debuffs from this champion, so it's a full cleanse on herself, puts a 50% increased attack, crit damage, and crit rate on all allies for 3 turns. It's a 3-turn buff on a 2-turn cooldown, then grants an extra turn. So theoretically, it's a 1-turn cooldown. You can use it every other turn, but it helps cycle back to that A2. So it really, if you start with the A2 before you use the secret skill, then the A2 is effectively a 2-turn cooldown, and the A1 can hit multiple times. But the best part of her skill, everybody remembers back when Vonda was like meta because of her ally attack. She would just come in with even like support champions and turn their A1s into hard-hitting abilities because her ally attack in. Well, she gets an ally attack, but it's 50% chance to team up with them anytime anyone attacks to join their attack, with that big AoE nuke that ignores block damage. That pretty much covers anything in the arena, but just on the off chance that we're stuck fighting a Marius, we don't bring in Gizmak because the way Incinerate is on 6 star, it decreases the turn meter whenever they receive damage from a burn, so that pretty much forces Marius into going before anyone else, like kind of in the same way that Calbalax or Gizmak's burn will force Teox to go before anyone else, except for on the opposite team. So we swap Gizmak out for Cometus. I think everybody knows what Cometus does on his second form at this point. He just throws out bombs and stun, and if it doesn't kill you, it'll stun you. Well, his first form is actually really good. The A2 strips all buffs from all enemies, and then places a block active skills on them for 2 turns. It also steals 20% of the turn meter for each enemy under a block active skill. So if you're in the arena full of people and you landed on everybody, that's 80% turn meter he's going to gain back and take 20% of the turn meter away from everybody else. So it kind of works as a decreased turn meter on everybody as long as you have the accuracy to do so. The A1 is a double hitter, and each hit decreases the target's defense by 2% up to 20, and it also steals 10% of the target's turn meter, so he's getting a lot of control on the first form. But finally, the A3 attack one enemy, steals all of the target's turn meter, and puts the target's skills on cooldown. Very short, very simple, but very powerful skill. And then passively, whenever this champion loses 30% or more HP in a single turn, deals damage to the attacker equal to 30% of the champion's max HP and occurs once per turn. You got him at 100k HP, somebody attacks. He loses 30% of his HP, well, there's 30k of their HP gone too. Also, when this champion loses 30% or more in a single turn, puts a shield on them equal to 30% of the champion's max HP. So if they lose a third of their health, they get a third of it back as a shield. And he's got Brimstone on, just because I feel like every team needs to have one champion with Brimstone, because that extra like 10% enemy max HP, what does it say? Sorry, that's 25% of the affected champion's max HP, and all other enemies by 5% of their max HP. That can really turn the tide of a fight. Think if y'all are pretty much button heads and you're basically an equal team, that smite can literally give you a 25% damage boost that they're not getting. You don't really hear people or see Brimstone much in the arena, but I feel like it is very overlooked. And also, when it's 6-star, the smite is guaranteed and it's protected, so it can't be cleared off by any means necessary. So even cleanses, they're still going to take damage. That's pretty much what I go through when I'm going into the arena. I mess around with other champions, but that's like my go-to arena strategy. And so far, I tend to keep between a 70 and 90% win rate. It tends to not really drop below the 7 out of 10. And that's, the game's math or algorithm is basically designed to keep you as close to 50-50 as possible. And so considering I don't really get below 70, I think that's a pretty good indicator to go off of. Now, finally, what I was wanting to bring up, we was going over all the new updates in Raid earlier, and this guy made a comment that really stuck out to me. It's pretty long, so brace yourself. The guy with, speaking of which, we was talking about the champion in the What's New with Raid video that had the Medusa shield. The guy with the shield of 3 dogs, that monster is Cerberus, who guards Underworld entrance. So I hope that Cerberus the dog comes too and will be part of the Packmaster Dank. That would be a great idea, man. Many of these Greek heroes, you can actually know pretty well what is up with them, since many have marks, signs, etc. That is the copy from Greek mythology, and I didn't think about that when I was watching the video about the Argonaut faction. Their lore could definitely give you an indicator to what their kids are going to be. If you know a little about that, then it is even more fun. I used to read all of them again and again when in my teenage years, and I have some wishes of gods, goddesses, and heroes I would really like to see. The new Fusion also has so much history linked to him in the mythology, history. I liked everything with this new info except for the arena stuff. But finally, I can now decide if I want to do it compared to the other arena stuff we have to do. Oh, by the way, the new Fusion looks sick. So freaking amazing. My favorite so far in the game, and this Greek faction looks a bit more grown up, not so hysterical, cartoonish, and childish like so many other factions and heroes of late. Sorry, but 4 ninjas kicking reptiles with bandanas is an effing turnoff. They look absolutely awful. I am going Titus also for my first hero token. Dude, then the dog Crocad, third the Mad Hatter. Cheers from a Greek in Sweden, nice bid mate. Oh sorry, but do you know if Armed Wide is any good? I am free to play, so he is my first ever mythical from a pull during the Nodula fusion. I just have the free one Mikage, etc. I like a lot of what you're saying there, and I hope the game actually takes that into account when they're doing the kits for these champions, because I agree. I like Predator a little bit. I like the movie with Schwarzenegger. The first one, I don't really like the other ones, or the Netflix series. I'm a big fan of the alien lore, but I've never been a big fan of the movies per se, but I think the monster itself is one of my favorite monsters in all movie history. And I do agree also, I like that they're taking a more down-to-earth turn with this new faction. I mean, I love the Undead Hordes, I love the Skinwalkers, but I wasn't a big fan of the Turtles. I know a lot of people loved them, but I don't know if they love them for the lore and the actual IP, or if they just love how great and OP the Turtles are together. But yes, Arn, he's the, I believe, the most recent mythical, and he's maybe the best mythical. I don't have him, but just reading through his kit, he has in the top 3 most OP sounding kits in the game. So if you got him, dude, build him up. Hopefully you'll get a soul for him, but I feel like, especially the way you make your account sound, he's going to be game-changing for your account. And I guess that's going to wrap it up for this video. I have to get ready for work in the morning. Thanks everybody for watching. Y'all have a good night, and as always, have a great day.